Net worth is one of the best ways to determine where you stand from a financial perspective. I think one of the ongoing issues today is that people try to convince themselves using other metrics that they are good with money, when in reality, that's just not the case. The most common example of this is when people use income as an indicator of financial success. And don't get me wrong, it's important to have a solid income, because after all, the more money you have coming in, the more money you're able to use to invest and build wealth. However, income is not the answer to everything, because as we know, a lot of high earners in the US don't save or invest anything month to month. Lifestyle creep and consumerism can eat up an income of any size. So when it comes to assessing where you stand financially, I think that instead of looking at how much you make, it is better to look at how much you have. So to get an idea of how the average American is doing financially, we are going to look at the average and median net worth of Americans by age. And you should also look into hitting that subscribe button so that you can stay up to date on all of my latest videos. We're also trying to get to 400 subscribers, so I would really appreciate it. Thanks. And before we jump into the numbers, let's first determine how net worth is calculated. Your net worth is really the total value of all of your assets added up minus the total value of all of your liabilities. And assets would be things that you own that have value. So things like a house, stocks or investments, a car. Again, it can be anything. It's anything that you own that has a dollar value associated with it. And liabilities are things that you owe money on, which is typically debt. So this could include a mortgage, a car loan, credit card debt, student loans. The list really does go on and on. So if you want to calculate your net worth, add up all of the things you have, subtract it by the total amount of debt that you have, and there you go. All right, so the first age group that we're going to look into is those that are under 35. And I want to acknowledge that this is a very large age bracket. Someone who is in their early 20s is in a much different phase of life for someone who is 35. It's a big range. It includes college kids, professionals, and people who have been established in their career for over a decade. So if you're in college or if you're just getting started out in your career, then this part of the video can still be a great roadmap for you. But don't let these numbers discourage you because you're just getting started. No one expects you to have a solid net worth built up at this point. Instead of worrying too much about your current net worth if you're in your early 20s, you should instead be learning as much as you can about personal finance so that you can build the habits to eventually get to the stage where you actually have a solid net worth. For example, you need to learn how to budget. You need to learn how to live below your means. You need to learn how to save and invest towards your retirement. And you're going to find throughout this video that most people never learn those skills. And most people are severely behind when it comes to net worth and investing. So make sure that you are learning the basics when it comes to personal finance so that you don't end up like the median person in this country and find yourself unprepared when you get to retirement age. All right, let's get to the numbers. For those who are under the age of 35, the average net worth in the US is $183,000, while the median net worth is $39,000. And we need to break that down because there is a huge difference between the two. You're probably asking, why is the average so much higher than the median? Well, because of the way the average is calculated, that number is being skewed heavily by those who have abnormal outlier net worth. They're making the average American look much better than they actually are. And that's why I also included the median as a part of this video, because the median is just looking at that person right in the middle. It's looking at the 50th percentile American to see how they're doing financially. And the median tells a completely different story at just $39,000. So I'm going to continue to share both of these numbers throughout the video for each age range. But again, keep in mind that the median is actually a better representation of how the average American is doing. And whether or not this median net worth of $39,000 is good at this stage of life depends entirely on where you fall in this age range. Because again, if you were in your early to mid 20s and you had a net worth of $39,000, I would say that's great. And you're well on your way to becoming a millionaire at some point. But ideally, I think your net worth should be a little bit higher when you're in your 30s. Because by the time you're in your 30s, you've probably had a decade of investing towards your retirement. You may have purchased a primary home, and hopefully you've just been saving and investing for the various financial goals throughout your life. So because this just covers such a large range of people, it just depends on how old you are, it depends on where you live, but I think that overall, people in this age group could be doing a bit better and prioritizing this early on. And again, it's all about building strong financial habits, and you want to start investing in this stage because it's going to be the best time in your life to take advantage of compound interest. I recently did a video on compound interest and why it's absolutely critical when it comes to investing, so if you want to, make sure you check that out. And on top of building strong financial habits at this stage, you also need to avoid a lot of the traps that prevent people from building wealth. Some of the things that just make it really hard to build wealth are student loans, buying cars you can't afford with debt, having credit card debt, and just overall living beyond your means. You want to start your life at this stage from zero and build from there instead of being in the negatives and having to dig yourself out of a hole. So just make sure you're being careful. Don't take out a bunch of debt to buy things you want, and that's going to help you a ton. Another thing that's going to help you a ton is hitting that subscribe button. Again, we're trying to get to 400 subscribers, so I would really appreciate it. Thank you. But now let's get to those who are between the ages of 35 and 44. And hopefully once you get to this point in your life, you have a well-established retirement account that you've been contributing to for a decade or two. And hopefully because you adopted strong financial habits early on in your life, you're finally starting to feel the effects of compound interest, and you're feeling like your hard work is finally paying off financially. For those between the ages of 35 and 44, the average net worth is $548,000, while the median net worth is $135,000. Again, there's a big difference between these two numbers. And I think in this age group, we have a similar issue to what we did in the last one, where whether or not the median is a good net worth or not fully depends on where you fall in this age range. Again, if you're 35 years old and your net worth is $135,000, that's pretty solid. Hopefully it would be a little bit bigger if you've been contributing to your retirement for a decade, but let's say you got started in your late 20s or your early 30s. If you had a net worth of $135,000, you're still on track to having a great life financially. However, if you're in your 40s, $135,000 just is not going to be enough. You probably should be closer to the average of having over $500,000 at this point. And this is especially the case if you own your own home. Because if you own a home and your net worth is $135,000, then that means that a lot of your net worth is probably tied up in the equity of that house, and you don't actually have that much invested for retirement. But here's the good news. If you find that you're a little bit behind when it comes to building net worth and investing towards retirement, you still have a lot of time to catch up. In fact, at this point in your life, you still have a majority of your working life ahead of you. Sure, you're not going to have as much compounding power as you did in your 20s, but if you start right now and you really kick it into gear, you still have time to build a solid net worth throughout your working life. Okay, let's jump to those between the ages of 45 and 54, where the average net worth is $971,000 and the median net worth is $246,000. And this needs to be a wake-up call because the median net worth at this stage of life is starting to get pretty concerning. While $250,000 might seem like a lot of money, money goes very quickly when you're living off of it to support your primary income, and it's not going to be enough to sustain you in retirement. And we also have to add in the fact that a good chunk of that median net worth is probably, again, tied up in the value of that person's primary residence, meaning that they actually have less than that invested towards retirement. And if you find yourself behind at this point, this needs to be a huge wake-up call, and it's officially a financial emergency for you because you're going to have to work very hard to dig yourself out of this hole and build a net worth that will sustain you throughout the rest of your life. And you're going to need to be aggressive. You can't just put 5% of your income towards your retirement and call it a day if you're behind at this stage. It's going to take a significant contribution and a certain level of dedication that may be new to you. So make sure that you're developing these habits as early as possible so that you don't find yourself in this frantic state where you have an emergency on your hands. And sadly, as we get to the older end of the spectrum, we see a lot of the same issue. For those between the ages of 55 and 64, the average person has a net worth of about $1.5 million, while the median person has a net worth of just $364,000. And the numbers stay fairly consistent for the rest of the age groups, and I'll add the numbers right here as well as we kind of walk through this. And sure, the average person has a solid net worth that probably is enough to support them in retirement. And that's great. If we were just looking at the average numbers, I would be very optimistic here. But again, the median tells us a completely different story. That the more accurate representation of an American at retirement age means they have just a little over $400,000 to their name to support them throughout the rest of their life. And this tells me that we truly do have a retirement crisis in America. Because again, $400,000 might sound like a lot of money, but when you consider that $200,000 of that might be tied up in their home, meaning they only have $200,000 set aside in investments, that's just not going to go very far. So I put these numbers out here to serve as motivation so that you understand why learning about personal finance is so important at a young age so that you can avoid being stuck in this trap by the time you get to retirement age. And remember, it's really simple to build wealth. It doesn't mean it's easy. It does take some sacrifice. It takes some learning, but it is really simple. And it's as simple as staying out of bad debt and making reasonable, good financial choices. It requires you to contribute regularly towards your investing and your retirement savings. I recommend that you contribute at least 15% of your own income towards your retirement at the very minimum, but I think it's even better if you can bump that up to 20%. And it might feel like a sacrifice, but again, your future self is going to thank you for it. And I also think that you should have the goal of having your home fully paid off by the time you get to retirement age, because when you're living off of your investments or a fixed income, you don't want to have to worry about rent or a mortgage payment. You want to have your house paid off so that you always have a place to live no matter how tough times get. But anyway, that's going to do it for this video. I hope that was helpful for you as we broke down where the average American stands when it comes to net worth. I hope this was motivational for you. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of this video. Do you disagree with anything I had to say here? Let me know. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to hit the like button, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.